Welcome back to another episode of Planet Hunters Coffee Chat. I'm Cassie Prolongo, and of course joining me is the wonderful and amazing Nora Eisner. Hey Nora.
Hi Cassie.
Good to see you. I hope you had a good weekend. I hope you had a good week. I'm here in my chunky sweater. I'm in California, so you know it's cold when I'm wearing a chunky sweater.
Yeah, it's very unlike you.
Very unlike me, and it's almost like oppressive having it come up like this. But you know what? I'm feeling good. It definitely feels like autumn. I've got my tea. So look at Nora's got her tea. Look, it's as big as her head.
This is literally the size of my head. This isn't even an illusion.
We're enjoying it. And, you know, we hope that you've been following along with our episodes. We had a little bit of a deviation last week. Nora took me to school, and, you know, if I had to give myself a grade personally, I'd say about a C minus.
Oh, I'd give you an A+. I think you did great.
Nora is very British and she's very sweet. But I needed to be taken back to school. But one of the things that came out of this is that we were talking about the acronym TTV. And that is,
Do you remember?
Transit timing variation. I remember that. I drilled it into my head. However, I am going to read just the first sentence of the explanation of what that is, because I thought it was a very roundabout way of saying what it is. And then let's talk a little bit about this in layman's terms. Transit time invariation is a method for detecting exoplanets by observing variations in the timing of transit. So that makes sense. I mean, I get it. It makes complete sense. But can we piece through this a little bit in like layman's terms for anybody who, like myself, last week was looking at you with a blank expression? This is another method for detecting exoplanets, though. So I think this is important. We should talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. And that was a good one sentence explanation of what it is, but it is slightly confusing. So we should, as you said, definitely go over it. Yeah, so there's this lovely NASA video that we can actually use to show this. So we'll start off with the more simple scenario of where we just have one planet going around one star. So in this case, we have no transit timing variations, because if we have a planet orbiting around a star, we expect that to be very, very constant. The time that it takes to go around that star is always exactly the same, and it's like clockwork. So as we can see on the right there, there's that clock, and that transit will always occur on the hour at 12 o'clock. Every time that this hits 12 o'clock, you get that transit, and it's always at exactly the same time.
It's consistent.
Yeah, it's very, very consistent. Now, that's only the case if we have one planet in this system. Now, if we, for example, assume that there are multiple planets in the system, in this example too, then those planets start to interact with one another. So I'm going to pause this very quickly and talk about what that means. So when those planets get close to one another, they will pull on one another, and that's with gravitational pull. And that means that one of them will be sped up and the other one will be slowed down. And depending on where they are in the orbit, they are sped up and slowed down by different amounts. And the way that gravity works is that the kind of amount that they interact with one another depends on how heavy they are. So the more heavy, the more massive these objects are, the more that interaction will occur. So because they're interacting, we can keep playing this now, because they're interacting with one another, the timings of those eclipses or those transit events won't be strictly periodic, and they will sometimes occur slightly early, as will be the case on that clock there, occurred slightly before that 12 o'clock mark, and sometimes it'll occur slightly late. So we'll see these timing variations, or these transit timing variations in the timings of those eclipses that tell us that there are additional planets in that system. And that is kind of the very quick stop tour of what transit timing variations are. So they can tell us about additional planets in a system. So for example, if we only see one set of transits, but we can see the differences in the eclipse timings, they're not strictly periodic, that can tell us about the existence of this other planet that might be too small to detect using other methods.
So is this a more reliable method currently in your toolbox for detecting smaller Earth-like, I put that in quotes, Earth-like planets?
It's a different method. So it's also a method, It's a method that lets you identify additional planets in a system.
Okay.
It wouldn't be the method that you use to identify the first planet, but it can be used to identify additional planets. And it also, what's really cool about this method is, if you remember, the transit method lets you determine the size of the planet, but it doesn't give you any information about how heavy that planet is. But if you see eclipse timing variations, that can also give you information of how heavy these planets are. And if you have both, if you have how heavy it is and how big it is, you can you know how dense it is, and you can start making assumptions of what it's made of, which is very exciting if you want to know whether it's a rocky planet like the Earth or whether it's a gassy planet like, for example, Jupiter.
That's cool. More science involved with this, more that you can gather, more data and stuff that you can gather from it. So we know with like our citizen scientists that they're able to go through and look at the light curve variations and the transit variations rather, and they're able to see the dips, you know, with light curve with Planet Hunters tests. Now, citizen scientists are unable to use the TTV method currently. They don't have this option of using it, correct, as another method to find exoplanets.
So TTV method is something that once you have identified something with the transit method, you can then go and look for TTVs, for these transit timings. So you have to very, very carefully determine the exact times of these eclipses. That sounds very straightforward, but a lot of the time these timings are very, very tiny, which makes it very difficult to detect them, which is why it's a method that's quite challenging to use. So for an example, the first ever system where these transit timings were detected was a system called Kepler-19. And in that system, the timing variations were on the order of 5 minutes. So sometimes they occurred 5 minutes early and sometimes 5 minutes late, but that change of 5 minutes was over the course of 300 days. So if you only have data over 30 days, as we usually do with tests, then those kind of timing variations would be very, very small and very difficult to detect in the time span of only 30 days.
Wow. So have you been able to use the TTV method for determining any exoplanet candidates yet?
So we use maybe not TTVs, we use something called ETVs. So that's eclipse timing variations, which is exactly the same as transit timing variations, except we do it with stars. So stars are much, much bigger. So the effect of these eclipse variations or transit timing variations is much, much bigger. So they're easier to detect. So there are some systems where we've seen that in multi-star systems as opposed to multi-planetary systems.
Gotcha. Well, something to look forward to, maybe.
Yeah, we should talk about that more.
Cool. Okay. We don't have too many other things, I guess, to talk about for this one, but we did want to explain a little bit about TTV and what it is, especially since with our previous episode, we were going through the different acronyms rather. We thought this would be a good one to just really talk about and have a little bit more of the science behind it. Nora, is there anything else that you wanted to mention or discuss with TTVs?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay.
Very fun.
So this was a bit of a short episode, but don't worry, we're going to have more episodes upcoming and we'll have more projects for you guys to work on. So thank you very much and good to see you. Take care.
Thank you.